for 515 Fantasy Football.
I know football.
Are you ready for some football?
Domination on Sundays begins with listening to these guys on Thursdays.
You ready for this?
Nearly 40 years of fantasy football experience between them.
Yeah!
One is a proud veteran of the United States Marine Corps, husband and father, entering his 17th year of fantasy competition. Brian Eikenberry. The other, also a proud husband and father, is one of the winningest fantasy minds in the state. Celebrating 23 years of excellence, Andy Hall.
Let's get the game on!
It's showtime. The 515 Fantasy Football Podcast with your hosts, Brian Eikenberry and Andy Hall.
It's like Christmas morning. Ladies and gentlemen, week 1 of the NFL season is upon us. Episode 3 of the 515 Fantasy Football Podcast is on the air. I am your host, Andy Hall, joined as always by my good friend, Brian Eikenberry. Hello, Brian.
What's happening, man? I absolutely love this. It is in sniffing distance. The season is happening. Been waiting 30-some weeks for this. Let's do it. Let's get it going.
It's a little weird this year because they're kicking off later than usual. We had the nice long Labor Day weekend, of course, and I hope yours was as fantastic as mine was.
Yeah, just did some rest and relaxation. Putting in the family time now because for the next 16, 17 Sundays, it's kind of game over.
Strap it on, wear a cup, whatever you got to do, get ready. We are here to prepare you for week number 1 of the NFL season. Brian and I have breakdowns of all of the fantasy relevant players in all of the matchups through Monday night. We also have the pop quiz segment, the ever popular pop quiz segment. We're going to do a little segment near the end of the podcast called the Bargain Bin. In case you're in a tough spot, we've got a few players in mind that you can plug into your lineup, and we think they will perform above general expectation, let's just say. But first things first, Brian, as always, starting with the headlines, and there are quite a few to go through, so I want to rip through these real quick, and we'll begin in Chicago. The wide receiver situation there, it's been very sketchy. The Bears coaching staff has been very coy about one Alshon Jeffrey, a guy who's typically been drafted in the top 10 or 11 wide receivers in most drafts leading up to the first Sunday of NFL football. The Bears remain optimistic that he will be available for week 1 versus Green Bay after his limited return to practice. But I got to be honest, I'm a little weirded out by what's going on here.
Well, you bring up a pretty good point, and it is being weirded out. And, if you kind of follow some of the offseason stuff, he was working out with Brandon Marshall. He was not working out with Jay Cutler. That's an issue for me. If the now number 1 wide receiver is not working out with his own quarterback and he is working out with the ex-wife wide receiver, a la Brandon Marshall, that's a problem for me. And I think this is just a very toxic situation. And if I have anyone on my Bears, honestly, take a look at it and see if you can get rid of them. Trade them away. Do it now before things get crazy.
I think maybe 2 exceptions to that rule. I would definitely hang on to Matt Forte because I think he'll be a beast, particularly in PPR formats. But then you also have Martellus Bennett, who I think is in store for a pretty decent season too, considering that the receiving core there in Chicago is less than stellar. And we'll get to that Green Bay-Chicago matchup here after headlines. Moving on, Browns coach Mike Pettin left the door open on Wednesday for Duke Johnson to play a big role in week 1 against the Jets. Now, Johnson is their rookie, and he's been limited, hasn't practiced a whole heck of a lot lately. They also just got rid of Terrence West, so that opens the door for Duke Johnson to play quite a role behind Isaiah Crowell in that offense.
Well, sure. That Terrence West getting released really just kind of cleared up a lot of situations. You looked at the Browns situation and the running back coach yelling at everybody saying nobody wanted this job. Nobody was going to work for it. Nobody wanted it. And clearly Duke Johnson has been setting himself apart. Even with his limited time, I think that's all precaution. With all the injuries going on, people have really kind of shelved their starters, hidden them away. Duke's in line. So if he's still out there, I mean, there's a chance. In some leagues, there's a lot that he went undrafted in. So go out there, check out your waiver wire, and make sure you snatch him up quick.
I think initially he'll probably play a bigger role in the passing game with the Browns on passing downs. I think Isaiah Crowell is still your first and second down back for the most part, and we'll see how Johnson performs, and he might just move up that ladder. Another running back situation we'd be keeping an eye on, and we're still not 100% clear on, is the Cowboys situation. Coach Jason Garrett said on Wednesday he hasn't decided on a starter at running back for Week 1 against the Giants. Some have suggested that it looks like Darren McFadden might actually have that starting nod, but I'm not sure it matters all that much.
Well, for the people who've been listening since our first episode, I called McFadden long time ago that he was going to be the starter of this team. I said by week 3 or 4, I believe, but to me it's pretty clear that McFadden needed to be given the opportunity to be that running back he was drafted to be. He's the one that I chose as the starter for the Dallas Cowboys, and I think that's the way it's going to play out. I really do.
Well, I think Joseph Randall has shown that he's a pretty mediocre back. I don't think he'll carry the full load there. And we've suggested, at least I have, that it'll be as close to a 50-50 split in terms of touches as humanly possible, with a little sliver available still for Lance Dunbar, who's their third down specialist. Philadelphia tight end Zach Ertz looks to be a game-time decision for the Philadelphia Eagles this weekend. Is he a guy you suppose would be plugged into most fantasy lineups this weekend, Brian?
Yeah, I would assume so. He's one of those reliable tight ends that's always there. He's always going to catch passes. He's really good at work in the middle of the field, too. So be on the lookout. Hopefully, stay tuned for our Sunday morning segments. We're going to have that little injury update and that go and no-go episode in there. So stay tuned and make sure you got it dialed in so you're up to date and aware.
Des Bryant practicing in full for Week 1, which is great news. Just piggybacking on the Cowboys conversation. Anybody that was concerned with Des, it looks like he's a full go. Moving on, Trey Mason of the St. Louis Rams remains sidelined on Wednesday. He was also held out of Tuesday's practice with that hammy problem. Not a good sign for his Week 1 status, or for the Rams for that matter, who have absolutely zero chance to beat Seattle in that matchup. Looks like maybe Benny Cunningham, of all people, is probably going to be carrying the load there. They don't expect Todd Gurley to become involved until at least Week 4.
Yeah, it's kind of a real shame. I was really hoping Gurley was going to be ready to go. This would have been his opportunity to just walk in and steal the show from here on out. But, it's one of those things where you're not even going to play a Rams running back on the first week anyways, and especially now with Cunningham taking the load, it makes you just kind of cringe at the old Zach Stacy guys who bought in last year and drafted him high, just amount to utter failure there. So stay away from that situation for at least Week 1.
Doubt is starting to creep in whether Mike Evans, wide receiver of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, will be ready for Sunday's opener against the Titans. He's also nursing a sore hammy, and if he can't go, looks like Louis Murphy will probably get most of the snaps opposite Vincent Jackson. I'm not sure they're going to light up the sky with rookie quarterback Jameis Winston under center, but it is worth noting that a guy that's been drafted pretty high on most cheat sheets, Mike Evans, might be held out of Week 1.
Yep, it's just another one of them, the hamstrings. If you look at it, it really comes down to off-season conditioning and who took care of themselves, who's going through the motions, doing proper stretching and exercising and lifting and doing all this stuff. I think it's really coming back, and it's really showing that work ethic, and that's something to be aware of when you're heading into these drafts and just kind of being aware of the overall picture. It's not really going to affect your draft stock, but, again, keep it locked and loaded on Sunday mornings right here.
It's an interesting story here that came down midweek. Coach Chuck Pagano of the Indianapolis Colts said Frank Gore will be on a, quote, pitch count to open the season in order to keep him fresh for a playoff run. It's not as though they've got an awful lot of depth there in Indianapolis. Looks like Josh Robinson, Tyler Varga are the guys that'll spell Gore from time to time. I'm not sure I totally buy into this. Do you?
Well, I don't see it as too big of a concern, even if he is on the quote pitch count, because for me it's limiting his touches. But he was never going to get the ball in the middle of the field anyways. He's not going to rip off a 40-yard run. Frank Gore is there really to pound that rock inside and get you those touchdown points. So as an owner, I'm not really concerned with that statement, whether it's accurate or not. I would expect it to be, but I wasn't planning on him getting those carries at the 30-yard line, with 70 yards to go. That hits Andrew Luck and his receivers to take care of that part. Gore's going to be down towards the goal line to get them touchdowns.
What's your take on a lot of folks drafting Victor Cruz in fantasy drafts? The latest report is that Cruz may not be ready for action until at least week 4.
If you kind of look at the Giants' history with wide receivers, it's kind of the new hotness, and then they seemingly fade away. Will ODB be that next person who seemingly fades away? Nobody thought Victor Cruz was going to kind of fade away the way he has over the last year, especially the back half. I kind of stayed away from that. There was only one Giants receiver that was going to get on my board, and he was gone in the first round, obviously. But it's just Victor Cruz. He was big time, and now he's kind of no time.
Well, I'm just shocked at how many people are taking him in drafts. I think nearly every draft I've been participating in this year, and I'm in, like I said, a half dozen leagues or so. Everybody seems to be taking Victor Cruz. I'm just surprised because I just don't think that he'll ever fully get back to what people might remember him as.
Well, and that's the good thing about being educated in your fantasy football drafts. There's always that one team or two who lucks out and they weren't quite knowing what they were doing. But the educated managers know that it's not name recognition. It is knowing the new players and monitoring that waiver wire. That's how you win championships. And you watch those suckers take the Victor Cruz while you pick up Coleman from the Saints. Let them do that. Go ahead. I'll take Coleman over Cruz any day.
All day, yeah. I'm not arguing with that. I'll let people take what I think are bonehead picks and laugh all the way to a championship, hopefully.
You bet.
One last bit of headlines here, Brian. C.J. Spiller not expected to play in Week 1 at Arizona, meaning that Mark Ingram is pretty much going to shoulder that load.
That's actually something worth looking at. I was really expecting Spiller to do some pretty amazing things this year, and he was really high on my own personal power rankings for running backs, and he was taken from me in every draft. And now that this news is kind of breaking, I'm glad he got snatched up before me, because for me, injuries going into the season is very dangerous for the rest of the season. I know it's 16 games, but if you're already injured now, you can rush back, you're not fully healed, you got a chance of re-injuring yourself, and re-injuring is always worse. And that's the bad part of this. So I'm happy none of my players are questionable in any way, shape, or form on my two big teams. So I'm good to go there.
All right. We're going to jump right into Week 1, Brian, and we'll begin with the Thursday night matchup featuring the New England Patriots and the Pittsburgh Steelers, which I believe you have broken down for us.
Yeah, this one kind of seems like a hands down. If you look at fantasy studs, relevant players that is on everyone's roster, I mean, you've got a powerhouse, high-scoring game to kick off the season, and I couldn't be happier. I mean, I am stoked to watch football and drink some beer. So just kind of heading into it real quick, you got Tom Brady, absolutely an A for a grade on here. The Steelers are the 27th ranked pass defense. Tom Brady is going to be extremely upset, looking to prove a point with fully inflated balls. So you look at Gronk, you might as well throw a Gronk on A2, giving him an A. Yeah, moving over to Pittsburgh, this is going to be it's all in the air. Le'Veon Bell's out for the first 2 games. This game is all airtime. So Big Ben's going to get a B here because the Patriots have the 17th ranked pass defense. But Heath Miller, he's a good tight end that you got out there. He's going to catch some balls. Le'Veon Bell's gone, and Antonio Brown. We're going to see him in action and see if he can be the number 1 receiver again. This is going to be a high-scoring game with lots of airtime. So them balls are going to be checked for air pressure 24/7. Nothing but A's and B's out of your fantasy studs in this matchup.
What's your take going a little deeper with the Pittsburgh Steelers, seeing as Martavis Bryant is out for the first 4 games of the regular season? Seems a popular pick to have Marcus Wheaton plugged in as wide receiver 2 in that Pittsburgh offense. What do you think he gets after Antonio Brown's touches?
Well, he's going to get the ball, but I'll give him, let's say, like a B-, C+, because I think Big Ben's really going to trust Antonio Brown and Heath Miller. It is going to be those 2 guys underneath, and it is just – I don't think it's that trust is there because this is such a huge game. It's the first game of the season. It's on national TV, and it is going to be stars, stars, stars. I don't think it's going to be, he's the number 2 wide receiver tonight, but any other night he's not going to be there. He's going to be just that situational guy. So it's going to be stars, stars, stars.
So basically the only bad starts this for the Thursday night matchup would be the 2 defenses.
Yeah, I would not have Pittsburgh or New England's defense anywhere near this.
Moving on to Sunday's action, I'll begin with my breakdown of the Green Bay-Chicago matchup. A lot of local interest there. Fans of both squads here in the Des Moines area and in the 515. Aaron Rodgers gets an A. Bears give up the 6th most fantasy points in the league to the quarterback position last season. They really did nothing to make me believe they'll be anything but terrible again this season. So Rodgers threw for over 600 yards and 10 touchdowns against the Bears last year. No reason to believe he won't do that again and carve them up on Sunday. Jay Cutler on the other side of the ball gets a C+ for me. Green Bay ranked 11 against the pass in 2014. They fared well against Cutler, forcing a total of 4 interceptions in 2 matchups. Even with the loss of Marshall and the uncertainty of Jeffrey's situation, I don't think it would have mattered. Cutler probably average output at best from the passing game in general in this one. Moving on to the running games, Eddie Lacy gets a B+, a good bet for multiple touchdown game as the Bears will likely need to pick their poison in facing a high-octane Packers offense that can beat them more than one way. Chicago, very middle of the road last season against the run, but actually did hold Lacy in check in both matchups last year, aside from a long receiving touchdown in the second meeting. Thus the reason for the B+ instead of an A like most people would have expected. Matt Forte also gets a B+ for the Bears. No question the Chicago offense will rely early and often on him, both running and receiving. He fared much better at Soldier Field than Lambeau in his 2 games against the Packers last year, and of course this first game here is at Soldier Field in Chicago, so I think Forte will have a pretty good game. Randall Cobb, I give him an A start. Despite losing the 1A to his 1B in Jordy Nelson, Cobb's going to remain a focal point of that Green Bay passing game. He'll get involved in more creative ways as well. I do see him in the end zone at least once. Devontae Adams has that opportunity to step up and become that 1B to Randall Cobb's 1A, and he'll benefit from all the attention paid to Cobb. Leave him with a decent opportunity to score in his debut. Alshon Jeffrey gets a B- for me. I just think the uncertainty in regards to his injury status, to be able to rely on him on Sunday right out of the gate, you should probably temper your expectations there. I do like Eddie Royal as a sneaky start. I'll give him a C. He'll likely emerge as a serviceable wide receiver 3 in fantasy lineups once he finds his rhythm with Cutler. How long it takes to develop that chemistry is the big question. The 2 tight ends, I wouldn't bother with Richard Rodgers just yet. Comfortable playing wait and see with him in the tight end position in Green Bay in general. Martellus Bennett, though, does get a B start, likely the second best option in the Chicago passing game for this week. I think Forte is actually the number 1 best passing option, depending on how things end up with Alshon Jeffrey. So there's the breakdown for that one.
Well, and here's what's fun to look at is as lopsided as that game is going to be, where everyone's kind of expecting the Packers to go into sweep. If you look at the fantasy stars out of there, I mean, how many fantasy stars are on those two teams that you just went through that are on everybody's roster?
Yeah, most of them.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, it's one of those games where you may not want to watch it, but if you've got fantasy players, there's lots of points getting thrown around there.
What's the next matchup you've broken down for us?
The Kansas City-Houston matchup, and this is kind of one of those where, from fantasy perspective, you're not really looking at much. Just obviously, you've got the big names out there. Jamal Charles, he's going to get a B+ out of me. Typically, Jamal Charles is kind of an A kind of a guy. But you've got Houston. They've got the 10th ranked rush defense. Jadeveon Clowney's up to speed. J.J. Watt. I think their rush defense is going to get a whole lot better with their linebackers all coming in healthy. I think it's going to be just a bad situation for Jamal Charles. However, he is still Jamal Charles, so you will get a B+ out of me. Looking at the Macklin, I'm going to give Macklin a B here just because I wanted to give him higher because of Houston's pass defense, which is horrendous. But Alex Smith is throwing him the ball, and that doesn't make me give him an A. That brought him down. So it wasn't always the receiver, it's always the person throwing the ball. So that brought him down into the B's for me. Another tight end to watch here, though, is Kelsey. He's going to get a B because Alex Smith can't throw that deep ball, so he's got to dump off to that tight end quite a bit once the receivers get down the field. And I think Kelsey's going to have some scores here. I think he has a legitimate opportunity in the offense to put up a lot of touchdowns as a tight end. So if you're in one of those leagues that has that tight end and you've got Kelsey, you're going to be a happy guy this week. And I think going into the future, just all the way through. And then if you look on Houston's side of the ball, if you've got Blue, this is the week to play him. You're at a home game. Really, I think this is it. The Chiefs last year, rush defense, terrible. They were 28th last year in rush defense. This is a week to start Blue. He's at home, opening week, go for it. Let him have it. Let him run with it. Go all over the place. And then DeAndre Hopkins, just an absolute stud. He's going to be something really special in this league. He's going to get a B out of me because of the quarterback situation again. This matchup didn't have the good quarterbacks, so you can't have a lot of these wide receivers on your roster. You can't have a lot of action here. But I think both running backs in this, both get Bs, both are viable starts, and you've got one receiver on each side that should be on your roster if it's Macklin or Hopkins, and you've got a tight end and Kelsey. Other than that, I don't really see a lot of fantasy value to this game. So
yeah, it's all right.
Choose wisely on this, but let Blue have some fun this week.
You and I are going to agree on Hopkins and strongly disagree on Blue. His 2.7 yards per touch last year did nothing to impress me. So if you were to ask me, I would say leave Alfred Blue on your bench. Hopefully you're stashing Arian Foster because he looks to be coming back within the first 3 or 4 weeks of the regular season, maybe even sooner. We'll see.
Yeah, he might need a drug test on that one. He's coming back way too fast.
He's done it before. He'll do it again. My next matchup, Brian, is Cleveland, New York Jets. This one, speaking of short and sweet. Ryan Fitzpatrick is a C start for me. Cleveland, they were quietly a top 5 rated defense against opposing quarterbacks last season. What Fitzmagic has going for him, besides a sweet beard, is reuniting with former OC Chan Gailey, not to mention a nice set of weapons at running back and wide receiver. You likely have a better option this week, but the bearded one will be serviceable if you need him. The running back position, Isaiah Crowell gets a C+ for the Browns. While it was good news for Crowell owners when the Browns traded away Terrence West, his Week 1 matchup likely won't give much opportunity for the Crow to arrive. The Jets, they ranked in the top third of the league against the run last season. They don't need to pay much attention to the Browns' receiving options, so they'll load up and try to stop Crowell where they can. For the Jets, Chris Ivory gets a B+, and he's one of my big sleepers this year. Good matchup against 2014's 26th ranked rush defense, and rumors that he'll be more involved in the Jets' passing game bode well. The receivers, I like Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker. Marshall gets a B from me. Seems to have a good chemistry with his quarterback, and he'll want to make a splash in his first game in the Big Apple following the trade. Eric Decker gets a B-. His targets and receptions, they might drop with the arrival of Marshall, but he should benefit from drawing coverage from opponents' second-best options in pass defense, at least in my opinion. And one last item here, the Jets' defense and special teams, throw that in the mix. They get a B+. How can you not like this matchup? At home against Josh McCown and his band of misfit toys, plus the fumble-prone Crowell in the backfield. I'll take that Jets front seven and the Revis-Cromartie tandem in pass coverage all day long, Brian.
Yeah, there were a lot of action and defenses taken. Not in the last two rounds. There were some taken early in some of my big drafts. And the Jets were always one of those that were out there because I think the Jets defense is going to be really special and a whole lot of matchups. I'm not going to start them every week, but they have opportunities to do some significant damage and get you a lot of points on turnovers.
Agreed. You bet. What's your next one, Brian?
We are headed to, we're staying in New York, but we're going to Buffalo, so we are going west in this great state of New York to the Indianapolis Colts at Buffalo. And this is one of those matches where if you've got anybody on the Colts roster on your squad, you better move them into the start position and hit it. I think the Bills are just going to get destroyed here. If you go down it, you got Andrew Luck. And I didn't give any A's, so I need to make that perfectly clear because as bad as the Bills you want them to be, you probably need reminded that the third best pass defense and the 11th best rushing defense in the league.
And they've made some moves to improve as well.
Absolutely. Plus, they have Rex Ryan, who's all defense. So, with that in mind, it is also Andrew Luck and the number one passing offense. So, Luck is getting a B, T.Y. Hilton's getting a B, and I even threw in Andre Johnson because he should be on your roster. If you have him, he should be there. I can't imagine a situation where he wasn't drafted. He's going to get a C out of me just because he's still a little slow, but it's a lot of action. I mean, this is going to be a high-scoring game on the Colts side. As much as I want the Bills to step up and really start that defense, this is one that it is. You don't want to start the Bills' defense this week. As much as you want them to be good, this is one of those anomalies on their schedule where they're just going to get torched here. Looking on the Bills' offensive side of the ball, hold on. Let's go back. You got Gore. Gore is going to get his touchdowns. He is going to stuff that at the goal line. So Gore's going to get a B too. There's all sorts of Bs on Indianapolis' side. There's going to be a lot of action there. And if you stroll over to Buffalo, this might be one of those times where you start Indianapolis' defense because we've talked about it last week, the Bills situation with Tyrod Taylor starting. Where is Sammy Watkins going to fall? Who else is there to catch the ball? Lesean Mccoy and his hamstring. I just talked about it earlier. That hamstring injury scares me. Lesean McCoy on this matchup, and it hurts me to say it, is getting a C because of everything that's been happening in the preseason. It's all going to come down to him. I don't think Tyrod Taylor's the answer. I don't think he's even worthy of being mentioned, and that means 7 or 8 in the box, and that's bad news for Lesean McCoy owners with a healthy Bills defense that is really going to start clamping down on that rushing defense, and I expect the Bills to be in the top 10 defenses at the end of the year.
Oh, I completely agree. In fact, I think they're being drafted right now as number 1 or 2 in I think most drafts, and I think they'll probably finish top 5 regardless of, how that defense and special teams position tends to turn over. But is that it for that matchup for you?
Yeah, Indianapolis had the stars as far as fantasy value. Bills were kind of lacking.
Yeah, no surprise there. Miami-Washington is my next matchup. We'll start with the quarterbacks. Ryan Tannehill is an A start for me in this game. Nobody gave up more fantasy points per game to quarterbacks last season than Washington did. Tannehill can and will beat them with his arm and his legs. Top 5 start this week for sure. Kirk Cousins, not even going to bother with it. Tough matchup out of the gate. His top wide receiver option nursing a sore shoulder, so look elsewhere. The running games. Lamar Miller gets a B from me. Washington, a top 4 defense against opposing running backs last season. So this may not be as big a home run as some believe. Still, the Dolphins, they want to feed Miller as much as possible. And if he can also contribute in the passing game, maybe find the end zone from in close, he could turn in a decent game week 1. Alfred Morris on the other side of the ball, I'll give him a C. I don't love the matchup this week, considering the Dolphins know Washington's passing game won't be at 100%. They'll key on Morris a lot, making for tough sledding. So he gets a C. Passing game, Jarvis Landry for the Miami Dolphins gets an A. Love the matchup. The only worry I have is that Miami jumps out to a big lead early and decides to do the salt the game away thing with their running game, but I do think Landry will hit pay dirt this week. Devontae Parker, the talented rookie out of Louisville, gets a C start. Looks like he is going to play this weekend. The question is how much, and will he be 100%? I'm willing to take a wait-and-see approach with the talented rookie before throwing him into my starting lineup despite this tasty matchup, but I think he could surprise folks right out of the gate. As far as Washington goes, Deshaun Jackson, a C start. Flex play at best with a halfway decent Miami pass defense facing him. A front 7 that'll pressure Cousins into making throws before Jackson creates any separation. So those deep routes, you're not going to be able to see him take advantage of those the deep ball as Deshaun Jackson is known for, because I think Miami will be up in Cousins' face. Pierre Garçon gets a D start. I wouldn't even look there. He was a target monster just a couple short seasons ago. He may return to that sort of production in a better matchup, but this certainly isn't it. The tight ends, real quickly, Jordan Cameron gets a B. Likely Tannehill's second option of the receivers. Cameron, he's got a nice matchup here against Washington. They ranked 30th against opposing tight ends last season. Jordan Reed for Washington gets a C+, barely startable, only because Cousins will need to look safety valve while running away from defensive linemen all day. I'll wrap up this matchup with the Miami defense and special teams, another one that's being drafted high on a lot of people's boards. I'm going to give them an A start here. I think they should force some turnovers and pile up quite a few sacks as well. I think having Ndamukong Suh in the middle there is a big score for Miami's defense. They look to improve and stay ahead of the curve there in a very tough AFC East.
Yeah, I was pretty big on Miami's defense, so I was one of those guys. That addition of Suh there, it's going to do wonders for their rushing defense, and I think Miami's going to be a big contender this year. I like what they're doing down there. Really great
What's your
rebuilding. We've been spending a lot of time on the East Coast, so I'm headed out to Arizona. The Saints travel to Arizona, and from the Saints side of the ball, this is something that's pretty important. So, looking at the Cardinals, if you're still thinking that their pass defense, that they really got it together towards the end of the year, you'd be wrong, because they were 29th in passing defense, which was really surprising to me when I really started breaking this down. And if you look up and down the Cardinals defense, it was bad. They had the 13th ranked defense, the 29th ranked passing defense, and their offense wasn't that much better. Their rushing offense was terrible. Their passing offense was 14th. So you kind of look at today's roster and kind of see what they've been doing. The Cardinals, Carson Palmer's going to get a B here just because the Saints' passing defense was 25th and their rush was 29th. So they were even worse. So you just talked about it. The Saints are just going to have a ball. Mark Ingram's going to get a lot of touches, a lot of carries here. He's going to get 25 touches. Drew Brees is going to just airmail it everywhere. And here's something that people need to look into is some early reports came out that Colston is getting demoted to the number 3 wide receiver here. That's something we talked about last week, that he's old and he's slow, and you've got Brandon Cooks and Coleman coming up the rosters being the new hotness, and they're kind of pushing the old guy out there. So Brees is getting a B, Cooks is getting a B. Coleman's going to get a C because we don't know how he's going to play at that level and really develop into that role. Colson's getting a D. You're getting demoted. He's on his way out. That is careful. If you're one of those name recognition people, that we talked about earlier on the podcast. You need to go move Colston out of your roster and see if you can trade him to somebody who is uninformed and not listening to this podcast.
Absolutely.
Colston is poison right now. Forget the name, forget what he used to be, and move on. Here's one thing. I'm a big guy on Ellington. I hope he stays healthy. And the Saints' rush defense is terrible. It did not get any better this year. And Ellington is my only A out of this, which is a really big surprise. But it's a matchup made for him. And I think he's going to catch some balls, and I think he's going to run a whole bunch as long as he stays healthy. He's my only A out of this matchup.
I'll tell you what, man. If he doesn't do it here, you might start believing me that Andre Ellington is pedestrian at best.
Yeah, it's his job to lose, and that's kind of one of those positions where you want to be in, but you don't want to be in. Because if you have that one bad day, is that the hook? And I think Ellington's on a very short leash. Bruce Arians is going to monitor his progress. So this can be a good confidence builder, but if he doesn't have any luck against the Saints defense, he's going to be out the door pretty quick.
Real quick, Brian, how do you break down the Arizona receivers against the New Orleans secondary?
Well, I would love to give Larry Fitz some props, but it's another one of those name recognition things. And I think that's kind of the way all of the receivers on the Cardinals are. I stayed away for a reason. I really am a Carson Palmer supporter. The way he left Cincinnati and then is kind of trying to reflourish his career here. Either he's injured or his receivers are injured or slow. They're just not what they used to be. And it's bad news for the Arizona receivers. I'm out of that situation, and I suggest people would be too.
I'd say Fitzgerald actually performs much better with Carson Palmer under center when he does have him. I think John Brown is going to be an emerging wide receiver for this, for this team this year. So he's somebody to keep an eye on. And I think Michael Floyd is that name recognition guy that, was kind of the hotness a couple of years ago, and he hasn't done anything. So I think people can forget about him. Is that it for that matchup?
Yep, that's it.
Okay. I'm going to do one more, and then we'll jump into our pop quiz for the week. My last matchup here before the next segment is Seattle at St. Louis. Start with the quarterbacks. Russell Wilson, he gets a B from me. Fared relatively well against the Rams last season, who weren't one of the most charitable teams against opposing quarterbacks. With a strong running game and a new weapon in Jimmy Graham, I do expect 275 yards passing, 1 to 2 touchdowns, and some rushing yards mixed in from him. Nick Foles, I'm not going to bother with. He has the tools to be a serviceable NFL quarterback, Brian, but he just doesn't have the weapons to hang with a Seahawks defense that was best in the league against the position in 2014. So we move on to the running game. Marshawn Lynch gets a B+. It remains to be seen just how Jimmy Graham will be utilized by the Hawks, particularly inside the 10. That's what I'm really going to be watching. I'm also a bit concerned about their offensive line, which doesn't look great and didn't look great in the preseason. Still, I know better than to bet against Beast Mode, so he gets that B+. Benny Cunningham, we mentioned earlier, is probably going to be the starting running back for the St. Louis Rams. I think we'll just glaze right over that. Doug Baldwin gets a C+. He torched the Rams in their first meeting last year. He was incredibly quiet in Game 2, so I'll split the difference here. I'll give Doug E. Fresh an average starting grade of C+. Brian Quick gets a C+ for the Rams. If any of the St. Louis receivers hit pay dirt on Sunday, it'll likely be him, who, when healthy, he's a burner. He's got the ability to hit a home run now and again, so I like Brian Quick in this matchup. Jimmy Graham gets a B from me. I see him as a good, not great option this week against a Rams defense that was third best at holding down opposing tight ends in 2014. Always a threat to score from in close, however, and I do think the Hawks will get into that range quite a bit on Sunday. So Jimmy Graham will have his opportunities, no question about it. And I'll wrap up this matchup with the Seattle defense and special teams. They get an A here. A great start against a hurting unit, the St. Louis Rams. Brian, are you ready for the pop quiz?
I am here so I won't get fined.
Speaking of beast mode, I like it. Question number 1, Brian. Which Patriots runner will score the most fantasy points against the Steelers?
Oh, man. Is that something I can say none to? Because
It's a matter of national security. Nobody knows what's going to happen, so it's a guess.
yeah, that's man, oh man, oh man. It is so tough. So I guess you really just have to refer to the depth chart. It's just they really need to sign Ray Rice and just get that going there. I guess you got to.
What do you think of this, Brian? Hey, real quick, here's just a sidebar. Here's a name that maybe the Patriots should consider bringing in as a runner. Monte Ball.
You know, I guess. You know, one
Resurrect his career. Come on.
Yeah, you would be crazy to say it couldn't happen because that's what New England does.
Yes.
They rejuvenate people. They have a winning program. They have a winning system, and they believe if you can fit that system and be a team player, then you will work. And you know what? That's not a bad deal because Brandon Bolden, James White, Dion Lewis, crickets. That's the Patriots depth chart.
But who's your answer? What's your answer?
You know what? Man, the only person on the running back depth chart for the Patriots who has a touchdown in the NFL is Brandon Bolden. So I'm going to go with Brandon Bolden. That's my answer.
The correct answer, Brian, is Brandon Bolden.
Yay.
Nicely done.
He's the only one with a touchdown.
Well, and that was part of the reason why he's the correct answer. The other reason is Dion Lewis hasn't seen NFL action since my grandma was in high school. So it's been a while. Question number 2, Brian. Who will provide us with the biggest upset in Week 1 action?
You know, all right. So as I kind of scrolled down and was, making my picks for certain radio stations' contests, I was going through, and it really depends on how Carolina's defense is playing. I could honestly see Jacksonville beating the Panthers. The Panthers are vulnerable right now. They're hurting. They're not the team they were at the end of last year. And the Jaguars have a lot of youth, and they have a lot of excitement. And I think that could be it. The Jacksonville Jaguars beat the Panthers. That's my upset pick. I think that qualifies.
The correct answer, and I do like your answer, but the correct answer here is the Pittsburgh Steelers beating the Super Bowl champion on Thursday Night Football.
That is going to make the internet just die. Like the internet will die. Kraft will break out the video cameras. They're going to have to start deflating footballs again. Is that why you're picking the Steelers? Because now that the Patriots are going to have to play with fully inflated footballs, no one's going to know what to do.
I don't think about balls as much as you do, Brian.
Hey, they're just all over the place.
All right, third and final question. Which Dallas running back will have the most touches in their Week 1 game?
I think Randall's going to have the most touches just because in Week 1, just because that was his role to begin with. And I think it's going to be 60-40, but as the game goes on, you're going to see McFadden kind of pick up towards the fourth quarter. And then my prediction has always been it's going to be his job going forward after the first couple of weeks.
The correct answer is it's a tie.
Tie. Your games are rigged.
Well, if I would have given you the heads up on these pop quiz questions, it wouldn't be much of a quiz because you'd already know the answer.
I agree. I've never won a prize from this dang game anyways.
Let's jump back in and try to make these as brief as we can, Brian. We still have a handful of matchups to get through, you and I, and then I want to wrap up with that bargain bin segment in case some of our listeners are in dire straits at a position or two this week. Detroit-San Diego is my next matchup, Brian. We'll start with Matthew Stafford. I give him a B start. Aside from his penchant for turning the ball over, Stafford, he's a week in and week out starter in the fantasy world. He's generally good for at least 300 yards passing and a couple of touchdowns a week. He should have little issue finding his weapons in the passing game on Sunday in a nice warm climate as San Diego. Speaking of San Diego, Phillip Rivers, he'll get a C+ from me. Detroit, they were quietly one of the most dominant teams against opposing quarterbacks last season, but their pass rushers this season don't compare to the players they lost in the offseason. They might be able to hang with Rivers' stable of wide receivers here, but I think at least one gets loose for a long touchdown at some point in this game. So Phillip Rivers, a nice C+. Joik Bell, moving into the running game, a C start for me. Likely he'll split work with Abdullah. Also likely less than 100% healthy and not nearly as explosive a runner as the rookie. So when the rookie is given his opportunities, we'll see what happens. I'm kind of nervous. Amir Abdullah gets a C start from me. 50-50 committee on Sunday is what I'm calling. I know you disagree. And while I think Abdullah certainly has the ability to break one at any time, I don't think it'll come on the road against the Chargers this week. Call it a hunch. Call it what you will. Moving on to the Chargers backfield, Melvin Gordon, the rookie, gets a C+, probably good for 60 to 80 combo yards. I wouldn't say he's a lock for a score, however, which kind of dampens his grade this week against a Lions defense that can certainly stop the run. He didn't show much in the preseason either. I was very underwhelmed by what I saw of Melvin Gordon, but that could be the coaching staff playing it vanilla because it is the preseason. Danny Woodhead gets a C+, a better bet for a scoring opportunity, in my opinion, and especially for those of you in PPR formats, lots of targets in the passing game coming Danny Woodhead's way. On to the passing game. I'll make this as brief as possible. Calvin Johnson, a B+, still one of the best in the game. He should get your, season off to a fine start. Golden Tate gets a B, only slightly less enthusiastic about his prospects. He's a guy that should surprise a lot of people, given that much of the Lions' opponents will focus the majority of their resources into slowing Megatron, so Golden Tate should be open more often than not. For the Chargers, I like Keenan Allen, and that's about it. Most likely leads the team in targets, receptions, yards, and scores this season. He's San Diego's best bet through the air. He's a good candidate for comeback player, if you ask me. He gets a B- in this game, and that's it for that one.
Yeah, that Lions backfield, I know you're kind of directing me. I think Amir Abdullah it's going to be 75-25 out of there. So that's my disagreement for you there. I think it's going to weight the other way.
Yep. You and I just completely disagree, and we'll see how that shakes out. I'm excited. I'm actually going to be watching very closely. I'm going to text you. I'm going to call you. I'm going to hound you if you're wrong.
Yeah, they are the afternoon games, so I'll be waiting for your "you were right" text to come from you. So I'll be eagerly awaiting. On to Denver. So the Broncos have a offensive line that's in shambles right now. There's not much worse that's out there in terms of that, and I think that's going to really shine through, and I think there's going to be a lot of trouble this year. So, with that being said, Peyton Manning's still getting an A. Demaryius Thomas is still getting an A because Baltimore's pass defense last year was 23rd. However, the rush defense, top 5. So, as you look at that Baltimore backfield with the offensive line issues and Baltimore's rush defense, C.J. Anderson is getting a C out of me. I know he was taken extremely high in the drafts that I partake in.
Way too high.
Could not agree more. When I was sitting there watching people just, oh my God, yeah, I got C.J. Anderson, I'm just like, you have no idea. You have no idea what happened to their offensive line. You have no idea what's going to happen there. So you got Manning and Demaryius Thomas just lights out. C.J. Anderson, C. I don't expect much out of that. And if you want to flip to the other side of the running back situation over in Baltimore, Forset's getting a C too. It's one of those things where Denver's rush defense are studs. So this is going to be a passing game. As hard as it's going to be to say that for Joe Flacco, he's going to get to see as well. I don't see Flacco doing a whole lot. Never have, never will. Denver's defense is stud. Not a great matchup for Forsett either. Forsett is getting a C as well. PPR leagues, he's probably going to get a B because he's going to catch the ball 5 or 10 times. But as far as just flat out rushing in this game, it's not going to happen. Steve Smith, you're getting a C too. It's a bad day to be a Raven this coming Sunday.
Excellent breakdown, my man. I couldn't agree more on the Broncos offensive line. It's a mess.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And, and those that are pounding their chest about C.J. Anderson are going to be a hurting unit when Ronnie Hillman steps in. My next matchup, Cincinnati at Oakland. Try to make this brief. Andy Dalton gets a B-. The Bengals will be a run-heavy team again this season, but there are games on their schedule this year that could have you allowing Dalton some consideration. This is actually one of those games. So if you wanted to throw Dalton out there and feel okay about it, this would be one of those weeks. Derek Carr, don't even bother. The running game, Jeremy Hill gets an A. Oakland was dead last against the run in 2014. Didn't do a whole heck of a lot to try to improve that, in my opinion. Hill should pick up right where he left off last season and have himself a big day. Decent bet for a multiple touchdown opportunity out of Jeremy Hill. Giovanni Bernard gets a C+, taking a wait-and-see approach to kind of gauge the level of involvement in this Cincy offense before throwing him into a lineup, but I do think he can be serviceable eventually. Latavius Murray for Oakland gets a B-. I'd be comfortable starting him as a running back 2 or a flex this week. He's got some serious home run ability. We saw it last year, even with a relatively shaky offensive line. And Cincy isn't well known as a run-stuffing unit, so as long as the Raiders can keep the game within reach, Murray should be a decent play. On to the receivers. A.J. Green gets a B+. Oakland, surprisingly, among the top 10 against opposing wide receivers last season, which is very surprising. I do think, however, that Green will get his usual amount of targets, and he'll do with them what he usually does. Marvin Jones, returning from injury, is a player I am keeping a very close eye on. Targeted late in a lot of my drafts because I think there's great opportunity here. I gave him a C start for this one. He's an intriguing flex play if you're desperate. With much of Oakland's attention on Green and now healthy Jones could be a welcome surprise, at least in my opinion. For the Raiders, Amari Cooper, the very talented rookie out of Alabama, gets a B-. You drafted him to play, okay? His ADP was pretty high. So you drafted him, you're going to play him. Despite what looks to be an extremely difficult matchup on paper against the league's second-best team against opposing wide receivers in 2014, Cooper, he's going to be fed plenty. And Michael Crabtree, he'll gobble up as many targets as he can, as his team operates from behind all game long, but I don't think he's more than about a C start. The 2 tight ends are both C's as well. Tyler Eifert hasn't been given much of a chance to be a part of the Bengals passing attack for whatever reason, so I'm playing wait and see with him. Michael Rivera. Here's an interesting one. He could emerge as a surprise sleeper tight end this season, at least in my opinion, as I think the volume of opportunity will be there for the taking. I saw him perform at times last season. I watched him play a little bit, and I know as painful as it is to watch the Raiders at times, my apologies to Raiders fans, Michael Rivera was one of those players that I sort of stored in the back of my brain and said, he could be an interesting tight end sleeper.
Yeah, I think the Raiders are actually going to make some magic this year. They're not going to be this huge, fantastic playoff team, but I think they're making a step in the right direction. Just the moves that they're making, hopefully they don't fire the coach 2 games into the season, and they just take a nice, steady approach to this. I think they have some really great young talent there to really start making a difference. For a team that passed on Calvin Johnson in that draft, I think they've learned a lot of lessons in the last 3 or 4 years as a team and as an organization. So I think they're really moving in the right direction there. We're going to go from coast all the way back to the coast of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Titans travel to the Bay to really just have a bad game. This is good.
Brian, you should be able to do this one in 60 seconds or less. I'm timing you.
This is one of those games where it's either going to be 3-2 or it's going to be 65-72. You have no idea what's going to happen here. So out of all of that, I have only 2 people that should be on your starting week 1 roster. Doug Martin is going to get an A. And I know that sounds crazy, but he was going so late in people's drafts. He has no competition behind him at running back. He is the only one there. And the Tennessee Titans have the 31st worst rush defense. If you're ever going to start Doug Martin this year, it better be week 1 because he is going to have a game. Give that guy an A. And the only other person I got is on the other side of the ball, and that's Kendall Wright. I think he is going to be the receiver there in Tennessee. He is going to be Mariota's best little pal. So, Kendall Wright, you, sir, are getting a B until you've proved me wrong, which might be by about, 2:05 Central Time on Sunday.
Well, I'm going to try to condense this one down as quick as I can, but let's face it, the New York Giants, the Dallas Cowboys, this is going to be a high-scoring matchup. It usually is. I begin with the two quarterbacks. Both will get A starts in this one. Eli Manning. This game, historically speaking, always high-scoring. Vegas concurs with me, looking at the over-under. Eli will probably spend the majority of his game trying to keep up with the high-octane Dallas offense, and he'll spread it around to his weapons. Tony Romo, don't think too hard about this one. Romo's going to throw at least 100 more passes this season than last, and it begins on Sunday. The running games, I'm not as entirely thrilled with. Rashad Jennings, your likely starter for New York. Give him a C start. He may get a look up close if they get down there, but he's not going to be a headline from this matchup once it's all said and done. Shane Vereen gets a C-. He'll be involved in the passing game. He has the ability to pile up receptions and yards, but rarely finds pay dirt, so his ceiling is pretty limited. On to the Dallas backfield. I'll give Darren McFadden a B start in this one. I like him slightly more than I do Randall in this matchup by virtue of the rumors I'm hearing that he may start. We'll see if that happens, because if he gets that opportunity, he starts fast, which I think he can. He may just stay on the field until he needs a break, at which point Joseph Randall will come in and trudge into his 3 yards per carry. Gets a C+ from me. He'll get plenty of work. Don't get me wrong. 50-50, like I said, is what I think it'll be. But if history is any indication of future performance, I'm still not sold on him as a feature back. And I think McFadden fits that role better than he does. The passing game, Odell Beckham, A. You can't sit him. Ruben Randall gets a B-. No wide receiver. Check this out, Brian. No wide receiver was targeted in the red zone more than Randall last year. Ruben freaking Randall. I know. I was shocked when I
Well, maybe that's because they
too.
weren't always in there because ODB was taking it in from 40 yards out. Skewed statistic.
There is that, I suppose. The opportunities are there. Will he capitalize? I think it might be a sneaky flex play if you want to throw Ruben Randall in there. Des Bryant is an A start. Like Beckham, he wasn't drafted to sit ever. Terrence Williams gets a B-. The forgotten man is Williams. I've had him in my Dynasty League, and nobody seems to remember this guy. He might have disappeared for a few games last year, but when he's on, he can produce like a top-end wide receiver too, so I like him. The two tight ends, Donnell gets a C+. Maybe he'll get a red zone look. Otherwise, not a major factor. Jason Witten gets a B. He should get lots of targets in this one. So that's the end of that matchup. I did it as quick as I could.
Awesome. Well, my next one is going to be pretty quick. We've got the Eagles at the Falcons. On paper, this is going to be a pretty lopsided match. I think, anyways. I think the Eagles showing what they're going to do, a new quarterback, a new situation. So hold on now. Hold on. The people I have in this was my best report card out of all of my matchups. Out of all the fantasy studs that should be on your roster, there are 4 A's and 1 B. And it's just hold on now. So DeMarco Murray, he's getting an A. I think he's just gonna eat people up. The Falcons had the 21st rush defense, and the reason I say that is because I think the Eagles are going to be so far ahead heading into the fourth quarter. He is going to get all the touches for that entire quarter, just chewing that time off the clock. Sam Bradford, never a better time to start this kid. He's getting an A. I know as crazy as that sounds, but guess who had the worst pass defense in the entire league? Atlanta Falcons. So Sam Bradford looking like a champ. DeMarco Murray looking like a champ. Jordan Matthews, yep, you guessed it, A. So your 3 offensive weapons from the Eagles, as much as I personally dislike the Eagles team, A. Just studs. This is going to be a great fantasy matchup for those 3 guys out there on the field. So, what about the Falcons? Well, you're not getting a Falcons running back on my roster in any day of the week this year. So that's not going to happen. We're not even giving grades out to them. I'm not even going to waste the ink. But Julio Jones, yes, sir, you get an A. Why? Because the second worst pass defense in the league was the Philadelphia Eagles, which you have the two worst pass defense teams squaring off in week 1. Fantasy owners salivate. Julio Jones, you got an A, my friend. Matt Ryan, you have a B because you have no run support. And I think that is going to be the turning point of this game. That's what's going to bring it down a little bit for Matty Ice. They've had offensive line issues as well. But Julio Jones is going to catch those targets. He's going to catch those touchdowns. It is going to be A. Awesome matchup for fantasy owners.
And I believe that's the early Monday night matchup. The late one is Minnesota-San Francisco, which I have the breakdown for. And we'll begin with Teddy Bridgewater. He gets a C+ from me. Excellent efficiency when pressed into action. Touchdown Teddy. He can also beat opponents with his feet, as we've seen. I've got him ranked just outside of the top 12 starts this week, which means you're probably not considering him unless you play in one of those silly 2-quarterback leagues. But there's potential here, even if his ceiling is lowered due to a heavy dose of AP, and we know we're going to get that. Colin Kaepernick also gets a C+. He'll likely need to shoulder the load in this game in order to keep the chains moving. One of the biggest question marks at the position, Cap looks great when he's on, but equally terrible otherwise. On the other side of the coin, I wouldn't risk a start this week if I were you. The running game, Adrian Peterson is an obvious A. Carlos Hyde is a B. He'll be the bell cow in that San Francisco offense. And this should be a relatively close game, I think. So expect him to get lots of work, primarily running the ball. Reggie Bush, kind of an afterthought in this offense, wouldn't bother starting him. Charles Johnson for the Vikings, B- with much of the attention on Mike Wallace. Johnson should be a main benefactor. Likely a red zone target as well if the Vikes get into a third down situation inside the 10. Mike Wallace, speaking of whom, gets a C+. Given the lack of production in the preseason, Wallace is kind of a head-scratcher for all of us trying to project his output week to week. So unless you're desperate at wide receiver, I'd stay away until we see him do something. Torrey Smith gets a B. I like what this guy brings to the Niners offense, something they've been sorely missing, a guy that can truly stretch the field. The question is, can Kaepernick find him? You know, he should create some open space between himself and the Vikings' young corners. So we'll see what happens there, but I do like Torrey Smith. Bolden, I wouldn't reach for him, though he has kind of a knack for showing up in primetime games, but he gets a C-. The tight ends, Kyle Rudolph, gets a C. Hasn't been looked at much since Norv Turner arrived in Minnesota. It could just be that he hasn't been healthy long enough to earn the love, but I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Vernon Davis was downright awful last year, and I don't expect him to do much this year as well. So that's it for all of the Week 1 matchups, Brian. Deep breath.
Yeah, no kidding. This is great football because there's no bye week, so you get a full schedule. Your day is jam-packed full of football games.
And we'll wrap up here real quick. Want to thank some folks before we get to our bargain bin segment. Want to thank the folks at Southgate Media for hosting us, for housing the 515 Fantasy Podcast. And Brian, there are several ways people can find the 515 Fantasy Podcast. There's also several ways they can get a hold of us if need be.
Yeah, absolutely. You can check us out on the iTunes, the Stitcher, and you can check us out on Libsyn. It's how we host our podcast through the web. So if you are driving down the road, you're going to different business trips, your family's making you go here or there, make sure to follow 515 Fantasy Football on Facebook. As our episodes are posted, a link to the web will be there. You can stream straight from your phone. You don't have to download anything. Click the button. You're listening to the podcast driving down the road. As I said, the Facebook page, 515 Fantasy Football, or you can check us out on Twitter, 515 Fantasy on Twitter. And we have a little deal going this week. If you are having some matchup issues as you send it in for week 2, as you look ahead, if you submit an email by 8 o'clock Central on Wednesday evening for your next week's matchups, we will take a look at it. We will talk about it on air if we can, and we will make your matchup decision for you so that way the pressure's off and you can blame your loss on somebody else.
Yeah, feel free to email us anytime, 515fantasy@gmail.com. Anything else you want to say before we dive into this bargain bin?
I'm having fun, man.
It only took 3 episodes.
That's right.
Welcome. Yeah, I am too. Thanks for being here, Brian. You're the greatest, my man. This bargain bin segment, I want to try to do this every week. In case you're in dire straits and need somebody that most likely wasn't drafted, that you can just pick up and throw out there and expect something halfway decent. I have a quarterback, a running back, and a wide receiver, and we'll see what you think of these real quick, Brian. I want to try to keep this 5 minutes or less. Quarterback. My quarterback, Buffalo's own Tyrod Taylor. Reason being, he's facing the Indianapolis Colts, who were 20th against quarterbacks last season, 22nd against running backs. We know Tyrod Taylor can run. I haven't seen much of what he can do throwing the ball yet, but I bet that he'll surprise some folks playing from behind, as I'm betting Buffalo will be on Sunday.
I think that's a pretty good bargain bin, but I can dig a little bit deeper. I'm at the Dollar Tree store right now, and off the shelf I am picking off a 99-cent Teddy Bridgewater, because if there was any time that he is really going to shine, I believe anyway, the Niners defense is not even close what it used to be. They're in a bad situation right now. Adrian Peterson's going to take the load off. Bargain bin this week is Teddy Bridgewater.
There you have it. A running back to consider this week, especially for you Le'Veon Bell owners who are going to be without him for the first 2 weeks of the regular season. Consider D'Angelo Williams, a guy who was being taken in the top 5 of a lot of fantasy drafts just a few short years ago while he was a member of the Carolina Panthers. Although he has gotten older, he doesn't have all that much tread on those tires because, remember, it was always a committee in Carolina. Jonathan Stewart, D'Angelo Williams, sometimes Mike Tolbert, sometimes Fozzie Whitaker, sometimes name whoever. D'Angelo Williams is a guy that will be starting for the Pittsburgh Steelers and has halfway decent matchups these first 2 weeks of the season. So I'll throw him as my bargain bin running back this week.
I like that. I really do. But I'm not about to start agreeing with you on a consistent basis. And I know you don't like this one, but Alfred Blue.
No.
Yes, I'm telling you. Blue, you're my boy, Blue, and this is his week. This is his week to shine.
Again, here's another case of can't wait to send you the text, call you, mock you, ridicule you. We don't have enough time to do it on this show, unfortunately. But I will. You will be hearing from me on Sunday.
Beautiful.
Guaranteed. My bargain bin wide receiver for the week is San Diego's Stevie Johnson, former Buffalo Bill. I like Stevie Johnson because really all San Diego has in terms of that passing game from wide receivers is Keenan Allen. A lot of defenses will be focusing on Mr. Allen, leaving Mr. Johnson wide open in many cases. The guy's got some skills. He's shown it in the past. I kind of like what he can do as a kind of a deep sleeper.
Well, I'm headed back to Florida on this one, and I'm going with Allen Robinson, wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Someone's got to catch the balls there. Carolina's on their heels. Watch for the Jaguars to make a splash. Allen Robinson's going to have a touchdown. So if you
all right, my friend,
go. No, I was say if you were one of those wide receivers that are out there and you're the questionable, the hamstrings, it just seem to be plaguing a lot of wide receivers. You just heard 2 right now that you might want to pick up and give some consideration in week 1.
Particularly in that flex spot, as many of you have. I refuse to play in a league where there is a flex spot personally, but we'll get into that conversation another time. Brian, it was wonderful as always. Look forward to episode 4. Can't get here soon enough, but I guess first things first. Let's enjoy week 1 of the NFL season, my friend.
Well, hey, don't forget, Sunday mornings, you're going to want to check your feed. Refresh your RSS feed, check the Facebook post. Sunday mornings, injury update show.
And that'll be, of course, just very brief. Brian and I, for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, giving you quick updates on what we know heading into the games and kickoff. And then you can sit back, relax, eat a whole bunch of deep-fried food, drink a whole bunch of adult beverages. Essentially, don't take care of yourself at all. Let the wife handle it. Hopefully my wife doesn't hear this. Brian, it's been a pleasure. As for Mr. Brian Eikenberry, my name is Andy Hall. We'll catch you next week on the 515 Fantasy Football Podcast.